All right, Dana, welcome back to the Hitbombs YouTube channel. This is another edition of Wednesdays with Dana.
Good to be here, Josh. How are you?
Doing well, doing well. I think we're both
Good.
excited about this particular video.
Yep.
So a couple weeks ago, someone sent me the following video, and we'll pop this up on the screen, of a golf swing they found on YouTube from years ago. And when you look at it, Dana, it's a very aesthetically pleasing golf swing. It's very pretty. The positions look really good. And, the truth of where I was at from a performance standpoint was I could not drive the golf ball well at this time.
Yeah.
And I think this is where sometimes people get caught up in aesthetics versus functionality. Even to the point where a lot of people, when I posted a swing on Instagram, said that they preferred my old golf swing over my new golf swing. But the truth is, I would today bet that old golfer a lot of money in terms of being able to go out and perform on the course. And there are a couple key things that we're going to point out in the comparison that led to poor performance in terms of driving the golf ball. And I think this is really, really important because you got to be careful. And I want you to expand on this, on getting caught up in aesthetics versus actually being a functional golf swing.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I agree, Josh. And this is actually funny. This is pretty much how we met, because you knew there were some things going on and you actually brought them to the table. You observed the best players in the world, the best drivers in particular in the world. And then we sat down and we had a conversation about it. So to me, it's kind of like I just lost a bunch of gray hairs and we just went back in a time machine to have this conversation again.
Yeah. This was actually about 12 years ago now. I ventured out to California because, I was having issues driving the ball, and I was basically at a point where it was either I figured something out or I gave the game up. And it was cool because Dana was, on the cutting edge of some new information, and we were able to kind of put this together and make sense of some of my driving issues. And it didn't clean up overnight. This stuff sometimes, takes a little bit of work, but if you're consistent, it will eventually switch over. All right, so let's both start at address. Okay, very noticeably, if we look at the old address compared to the new address, obviously, my stance is a lot wider now. And to be honest with you, to my critique, I'd say maybe it's a little bit on the wide side of things. Don't particularly love that, but it's a position I'm comfortable in, and I feel like I can push pretty hard from. But if we go from P1 back to P2, which is club shaft parallel, and we kind of do a side-by-side, okay, one of the things that you guys will start to see right out of the get-go is you'll start to see the rate of load, okay? So P2, for those of you that aren't familiar with it, is basically club shaft parallel, okay? So when that club shaft reaches parallel to the ground, okay? Now, Dana, what do you notice about the old P2 compared to the new P2?
Well, the butt end of the club is very close to your body. It's hinged or however you want to put it, very, very early. And there's not much width in your backswing. So your width is pretty much reduced. It probably looks like your pitching wedge now.
Yeah, and one of my key points that I focused on for a long time was trying to understand how to get that club head working first and hinging the wrist. And at the end of the day, what I started to figure out was by doing that, I started to shut my body off. And the second my body started shutting off, the harder it was to turn on. So, one of the things when I went out to Dana, I never forget this conversation. I looked at Dana and I said, Dana, when I look at my golf swing and I look at some of the top pros on the PGA Tour, they all look like they rotate better. And he agreed with me. And the point was, it's very hard to rotate if your hands and your arms are the dominant force in the golf swing.
Yeah.
So ultimately, that's one thing that changed. The feet are a lot more involved. The body's more of the active source of power. And because of that, now we create a lot wider position at P2. Any other thoughts on that?
No, I think that's just kind of covering the bases. I think we nailed that one. Yeah.
Okay. So we'll go up to P3. Okay. And naturally, because there's more wrist set at P2, you'll see the difference in P3, which is left arm parallel. You'll see how much sharper those angles are on the old one. Okay. Yeah. Left arm is very straight, very rigid. Okay. We go up to the top, and what you'll see is a lot more acute of an angle between the lead form and the wrist. Okay. Yeah. So if we're looking at the very top of the swing, and we're looking at the forearm to the club shaft, I would say the old swing is a lot sharper, a lot more wrist hinge. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things. So from the distal part of your golf swing, for sure, you have way more load in your wrist. But interestingly enough, just your whole body position is completely different. You kind of have this like reverse hip slide look where, kind of you're forward with your pelvis, and now it looks like you're loaded. I mean, not to go off the deep end, but you're loaded in your trail side. And I think that is going to jump into the big subject matter that we're going to talk about. I mean, it's funny because in traditional instruction, you would look at the position on the left and you'd say, hey, you know what, that's a great position. You should be able to hit the fairway from there. But in reality, we'll see some stuff after this picture that's interesting.
Right. And ultimately, all of this stuff that we're talking about, prior to this point is going to lead to where the major issues started to kind of come in. So if we keep going down to P5, left arm parallel, what you'll start to see is how acute, okay, the lead forearm to lead shaft angle is, okay? And this is kind of somewhat contradictory, or not contradictory, but, what I'm trying to say is everyone talks about lag, right? Well, if we look at the guy on the right and we look at the guy on the left, I would say the guy on the left has a lot more lag than the guy on the right. And really what we're looking at is the angle between the forearm and the shaft. However, okay, if we get too much lag in the wrong way, it's going to be very hard to square the shaft up. And where this starts to show up is if we continue down to P6, and ultimately that is the point where the right, where the butt end of the club is in line with the right thigh. This is where you start to see where this thing broke down. And you'll see the old swing, how sharp that angle is, how much higher that club head is at this position. And on the new swing, you'll see that the club ultimately has less lag, and that shaft angle is now starting the process of letting out, which is now allowing that club to act as a whip, right? We have to somehow understand how to get energy to the golf club. So expand on kind of 4, 5, and 6 there, Dana.
Yeah. So, I mean, from the fundamental forces and torques world, you're pulling really hard on the hands on the left video. You're not using the proper ground force reactions that should transfer into the golf club. Obviously, the one on the right looked like Rory McIlroy. If I put you and Rory together hitting a driver, you guys are very similar position-wise. Obviously, we know that you're hitting the ball a lot further than Rory would, a lot. But from a positional standpoint, you look more traditional at P6, more like Rory or like an Adam Scott, other than the one on the left, which looks like your body shut off and you're just pulling your arm straight down to the ball. Right. Now, what's interesting about that is that that's in essence what you were trying to do. You're trying
Right.
to pull your arms down or release your arms down.
Yeah, and in my angle of attack, I used to hit, 3 or 4 down with the driver. You can see how low I was actually teeing the ball in this particular video. And ultimately that combination just led to poor driving. You could hit short irons pretty good, but if you can't hit the driver, you got nothing in this game, in my opinion. So obviously, on the right, teeing it a lot higher because I was working on trying to launch the ball, this particular day. But, if we continue to get down to, impact, you'll see, that shaft on the left is going to have a lot harder time getting back to a straight line than the one on the right. And that's the biggest thing is, like, when we're looking at good drivers of the golf ball, typically, if someone's saying they're having a tough time driving the golf ball, you really want to look at how that shaft is loading and unloading through the transition. We were actually on gears up in Philadelphia, myself and Dana, and it was really interesting because we actually started seeing my wrist angles let out very early into the downswing. So right around P4.5, is kind of where those angles started going the opposite way. And it was a response to how I was using the ground, how I was using the left foot, which you guys have probably heard about and will continue to hear about in other videos. But super, super important. This is why the guy on the right would bet the guy on the left a lot of money any day. So I think the moral of the story is, you got to be careful. It's sure, the golf swing on the left is very aesthetically pleasing. But from a functionality standpoint, there's a difference. So final thoughts, Dana.
Yeah, I think that's, the big thing. And what's cool, Josh, is that things are really changing very quickly in the industry. And I think, we're not saying that traditional modeling of a golf swing isn't important. I think it is. But if we start saying that the science end of the golf instruction industry can't mesh or marry the two, then we're really in a bad spot mentally. I think it's important to know that we can't visually see all the time what a player does, but we can certainly see how the player responds. And like, you're a perfect example of that right there in that first video of your old golf swing. Yeah, it's very pretty. And myself, if 10 years ago, if you said, hey, Dana, where would you hang your hat? I would probably say the same thing. I said that because you look more centered, or you look like your arms are doing the right angles or the right geometry, that you're going to hit the ball, solid. But what's interesting is you're swinging 115 miles per hour on one side and not being able to find a fairway. And then the one on the other side, you're swinging 150 miles per hour and you hit the grid all the time. So I'll take the 150 guy over the 115 guy any day. And I think it's
all the time, except for on national TV.
That's right. Exactly. Exactly. 100%. But I think, all kidding aside though, Josh, but seriously, like, that's exactly what Rory McIlroy does. That's why he's the best driver on tour. So I think we need to understand that. And Xander Schauffele's another one. They do the same thing.
But if you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. Also, leave us a comment below. Let us know if you want Dana to stay on the channel and what other videos you guys might want to see from us. From Orlando, Florida, Josh Koch, Dana Dahlquist, who is in Long Beach. We'll see you next week.
Cheers.